welcome back to the 5th episode of Rocco's Rundown. We're almost done going through each division and the rankings. The next episode, episode 6, is going to be the NL East, and then the baseball season will start probably as soon as that video is updated. But today we have the AL East, and this is what we have. This was tough. I will not lie. I try not to have any personal bias or anything. And also using my normal ranking strategy, how I did the other division. So it was definitely tough. But I do think we might have it right. So as we can see, order: Yankees in first, Red Sox second, Blue Jays third, Orioles fourth, and the Rays fifth. The biggest surpriser, I would say, is the Blue Jays third over the Orioles. We'll get into it, but the main reason why I have the Blue Jays over the Orioles is I think the Blue Jays actually did a lot more this offseason, and I'm expecting bigger years out of guys who struggled for them last year, like a George Springer, like a Bo Bichette. And the Orioles lost a lot, and I know they're young and they're getting better each year, but now they have some injuries, glaring injuries, to Gunnar Henderson before the season starts, and he might miss a good chunk of the season. So I think the Orioles are going to find themselves in kind of a lackluster position compared to last year. Even down the stretch of last season, the Orioles were pretty bad that second half of August and September compared to the rest of their season. So I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back. But we'll get into that later in the episode. For the win over unders, Yankees are at 88.5, Red Sox are at 86.5, Blue Jays are at 80.5, Orioles 86.5, and Rays 79.5. Yankees, I would go over. I think it'll be a little sharper than people may think. I think they're going to finish around 90 flat, especially with some of their early season injuries. I think the Red Sox are going to be close to this 88, so I'm going to go over with them as well. The Blue Jays, I 1,000,000% I'm going to go over 80.5, and the Orioles I'm going to go under. Kind of like how I alluded to prior. I think it's going to be a rough year. I think they're going to perform a lot worse than maybe a lot of people project them to. And I think they're going to hit this kind of wall where they need to rethink their strategy, especially with a lot of their young prospects, like what to do moving forward. And the Rays, I think, will go over. I think they'll be sharp over, but I think they'll be an 80-win ball club. I think everybody in this division will have 80 wins. It's a very good division, top to bottom, especially compared to the rest of the AL teams, which is pretty wide open. But I think it'll land this way. And those are the over-unders. Pacoda projections, just in case you want to know them. Pacoda has the Yankees at 85 wins, the Red Sox at 80, Blue Jays at 86, Orioles at 87, and the Rays at 83. I'm not, obviously based on my rankings, I'm not very in line with them on the Orioles. I'm more in line with Fangraphs. Yankees at 86, Red Sox at 85, Blue Jays at 83, Orioles at 83, and Rays at 82. I'm much more in agreement with where they have things projected, and it'll start to make sense. But before we get into why I ranked the lineups, rotations like I did throughout the division, the biggest thing for me was how these teams handled their off seasons, considering all these teams coming into last year. Well, not all of them. The Red Sox were not projected to be good. But the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Orioles were projected to win a lot of games. And obviously the Yankees won a decent bit. The Blue Jays won a good bit. The Orioles won a good amount. Excuse me. But the Blue Jays wind up missing the playoffs and finishing fourth. The Red Sox had even a better year. They finished 500. The Rays, a lot of injuries and some unexpected off-the-field issues. So this division had a lot of talent, but needed to come into this offseason with a plan and an objective how to improve. And that's honestly why I wind up having the Orioles finish second to last. But we'll get into their additions and subtractions. So when we look at the Yankees, I think everybody knows their additions. Goldschmidt, Fernando Cruz, Cody Bellinger, Devin Williams, and Max Fried. All these guys are phenomenal players. They're all-star level, capable guys. Maybe not Fernando Cruz per se, but they're all very good household names that you've heard of. Definitely aging. Goldschmidt is not getting any younger. Bellinger is not getting any younger. Devin Williams had a good year last year, obviously, but in the playoffs, not so much. And he's getting older. And Fried is actually older than Corbin Burns, which I didn't know until this offseason. So they're aging stars, or not stars, they're aging players, but they're still, very good, well above serviceable players. However, comparing their roster to last year, with adding all those guys, I still don't think they are a better team on paper. I think they might be a little bit better all around. Defense, speed, flexibility, but I think there are definitely some clear question marks. Bigger question marks than I think a lot of Yankee fans had coming into last year when they had Soto. So obviously subtractions include Soto, Trevino, Garrett Cole. He's a subtraction only because he's going to miss the entire regular season. Maybe he makes it back for the postseason. I'm going to assume no. So that's why he's the subtraction. You lose Clay Holmes, Gleyber Torres, and Canely. Trevino was more of a backup, so losing him isn't crazy. But Soto was obviously Soto. No matter where he goes, no matter who he plays for, he is going to hit, and he's going to hit, and he's going to hit. And he's going to hit an elite clip, and that's just Soto. So losing him, no matter what team, and gaining him, no matter what team, is massive. Cole is massive in part, not necessarily for the regular season, because Cole missed a lot of time last year, so I think regular season-wise, that's why I still think they'll win the division, because he missed a good chunk of the year, and even when he was healthy and coming back from injury last year, he wasn't the normal Cole, and I think every Yankee fan can admit that. So regular season, he's not a big issue. It's the playoffs. And even if he tries to make it back for the playoffs, are we going to get the Cole that we saw last year when he was coming back from injury was subpar? Like, not just for Cole standards, but also just league standards in general. Obviously not a horrible pitcher, but not an ace. Not even close to an ace. When he was coming back from injury, obviously he's an ace. So that's the thing is, even if he comes back to the playoffs, what version are you getting? So losing him is big. Holmes, now the thing with Holmes is he definitely struggled, especially in the second half, especially the last quarter of the season. So much so that he lost the closing position. Now the thing with Cole is I still think he's a phenomenal bullpen arm, and obviously, as a Mets fan, I'm praying he's a good starter as well. But either way, he is a good arm, whether in the bullpen or hopefully as a starter as well. So losing him, especially the amount of innings he contributed last year, is big. Now you get Devin Williams. He's obviously an upgrade. Gleyber, I think, is a bigger issue than even I would have initially thought. And the reason why is, again, the first half he was horrible. So I think regular season-wise, his impact is more than Garrett Cole's regular season impact, but not insane. But the second half, he hit nearly 300, had an 800 OPS. He was phenomenal for them, and he locked down that leadoff position. And I think that gave the lineup enough balance and enough depth going into the playoffs, and that I think is the biggest concern for the Yankees for the playoffs and also the regular season, but especially the playoffs is who's going to really take that leadoff role, and how is this lineup really going to shake out? Now, I think Boone is a perfectly fine manager. He's probably top 10 in the league or top 15, somewhere in there. He's definitely a top half manager. He's a solid manager. However, I don't know how well of a job he is going to do without them going to trade for guys. And I think if it's a glaring hole, like the Yankees need another hitter, they need a leadoff guy, they need a third baseman, they'll go get that. I don't doubt that. I just doubt how impactful that guy is going to be come playoff time. I think they can go get a solid guy, but I don't think they're going to be the type to go find the best hitter at the trade deadline. And I think they have multiple question marks that aren't just third base. You have a lot of young guys that have to kind of prove themselves. And again, also aging hitters, athletes, players that might take a decline compared to last year. They obviously could do better. Change of scenery is huge. But either way, and Canely is more bullpen depth, which I'm not worried about their bullpen. Their bullpen is phenomenal. It's one of the best in the league. It's got great depth. It's got a bunch of guys that you like. So I think their bullpen and their starting rotation, well, okay, I think their bullpen is a little bit better than last year. Especially on the top end. The depth you might question, but either way, it's a better bullpen than last season. However, I think the rotation is now the same because you're going to lose Heel for a while, and then Cole's out, so he's done. And this is more for playoff talk, I guess. Regular season, even that too. Getting Fried kind of balances it out. So, yes, rotation I think is roughly the same as it is last year. The problem is I think the lineup overall, just from the pure stance of hitting, is worse because you lose two huge contributors in Soto and Glaber. Especially in the second half, Soto and Glaber and the playoffs were huge bats. And you're going to lose Stanton for a long amount of time, which Yankee fans are accustomed to. If he plays more than 120 games, that's considered an ultimate success. But I think for the regular season record, and depending on which months he's healthy for, could impact them also in the playoffs. If he's not fully ready to go for the playoffs, then you really have even more questions about this lineup. So I think overall the lineup takes a slight decrease. Hitting, rotation is about the same. The bullpen gets a little bit better. But I think no matter what, they should win the division. I think there's a real possibility they could lose it depending on how bad the injuries really are. And if guys like Goldie and Bellinger continue to decline or if they kind of flatline. But either way, I think they win the division. But I think there is a lot to question and be a little concerned about. On the flip side, the Red Sox were a 500 team last year. They went 81-81. And their offseason, I don't want to say they nailed it, but definitely a top, probably 3 offseason. They get Bregman. They get Walker Buehler. Lucas Giolito will be healthy again. They get pitching depth in Patrick Sandoval. They trade for Garrett Crochet, who's an ace. We saw him last year on a team that gave him no runs and no real energy, and he was an ace. You get bullpen depth in Chapman, who's still a great lefty, and Trevor Story will be healthy again. On top of that, they have some prospects that are ready to go, including Campbell, who just got pulled up today, but you're going to have Marcelo Meyer. You're going to have Roman Anthony. They have plenty of top prospects. They have a great farm system. But those 3 guys are really going to be ready to go, and they're going to kind of fill in where their holes are for the most part, to where, yes, I don't know if they're going to be as aggressive as maybe the Yankees might be at the trade deadline, obviously. However, I think they still, the things that they need, barring, injuries, and if Bregman decline continues, or if he also flatlines with a new scenery, I think they will still add in those other areas that maybe just need a little bit more depth. And they also have a lot of trade bait. They have a ton of really good prospects. Trevor Story's got a nice little contract. Can he have a good year? They have a lot going for them to make their trade deadline also easy. So I think they can really push the Yankees for this division. I don't think it's going to be, 5-6 games. I think it might come down to the last series, which the Yankees last series against the Red Sox at least is in Boston. It's about, I think, a week or so, or a week and a half before the season ends. So that could also be a deciding factor there. But I think no matter what, the Red Sox and the Yankees, the rivalry has been there, but it's definitely back. And the Red Sox offseason was great. Some subtractions, just really some pitching, bullpen depth, really. They lose Jansen, who was big for them, but then you gain Chapman, so that kind of counterbalances. Chris Martin is some more bullpen depth. Nick Pivetta was big, but when you get Buehler and you get Giolito back, and when you get Crochet, that's way better than what they had last year rotation-wise. And they lose Tyler O'Neill, which he is a very solid, good player, plays every day, but I think with the young guys they have coming and adding a bat like Bregman and just the further development of this team as they continue to play together, I think the lineup also, I think overall they got better in every single facet. Maybe you can argue their bullpen is the same or a little bit worse on depth, but the lineup is better. It's gonna get better with the young guys coming up, and the rotation is light years better than it was last year. But the biggest offseason, in my opinion, which I think might be going a little not under the radar, but a little underrated, in my opinion, is the Blue Jays. Before I get to their additions, I just want to get to the subtractions. Of, relevancy, they lost nobody. They kept the same roster as last year. I guess you trade Spencer Horwitz, but what they get in return and their offseason in general, they didn't get worse. And they had a lot of down years for a lot of guys last year. Yes, Vladdy had an amazing career year last year, but he's only 26, and I think he's going to keep getting better. So I don't think they have to worry about a decline out of him. But their additions, Amir Garrett, some bullpen depth, which they need. Anthony Santander, that guy's a lock for 35 home runs, probably more like 40. Defense isn't great, neither is the average, but locked-in home runs pay. Starting pitching depth, Max Scherzer. Is he old? Yes. Is he the Max Scherzer he's used to be? Definitely not. But as a back-of-the-rotation guy, he's going to give you some solid innings. He's going to be nice for the clubhouse. He's going to be a good veteran for the pitching staff. He's got value. Bullpen. You had Jeff Hoffman. Had a great year last year. Okay playoffs. Until he ran into the Mets. No, but not to be like that. But still, very, very all-star level bullpen guy. Jimenez. The thing with Jimenez is his bat isn't the greatest. But even if his bat is league average, a pinch above league average, his defense is probably the best in baseball, one of the best in baseball, which will help them up the middle, which, in my opinion, they kind of lacked a lot last year with how inconsistent I felt Bo was. And then you add Yimi Garcia, another great bullpen arm. I just think overall their bullpen got a lot better. They added a little bit of pitching depth, and they just added home runs and defense, which pay a lot. And they lost literally nothing of any relevant value. So if last year was a down year with Bichette and Springer and injuries, if those guys even get somewhat back to the norm, which I think they will, I think they can, adding these guys, that's going to add a lot more wins to what they were able to get last year. And on top of that, there's kind of a lot of pressure on the Blue Jays, because if they don't do well, which some people might say pressure is a bad thing, But for the front office, like, they're trying to get a deal done with Vladdy. They want to lock Vladdy in. And Vladdy made it seem like he wants to stay a Blue Jay. So I think there's a lot of expectations for them in the aspect of they really need to put together a good season or else they're going to tear it all down. So sometimes that pressure is good for a front office, especially for the trade deadline, to pick up some pieces that they really need. And they didn't lose anybody this offseason. So I think that's already a really good step forward. And for the Orioles, their additions in total is a lot, but I don't think it's significant. Like, they signed a lot of, not a lot, but they signed a good amount of players, but none of them really make them a better ball club than last year. In fact, when you include their subtractions, I think they're a little worse. But let's get into it. So their additions, Kyle Gibson, okay pitching depth. I mean, the guy will pitch innings. Quality innings, I don't know. Charlie Morton is a solid veteran. But again, injuries, age, quality of pitching steadily declining. I don't know how much. For the contract, it's great, but for the overall value, it's okay. Dylan Carlson, same thing. Decent depth. I guess has a little bit of upside, but the decline has just been steady. Gary Sanchez, not a horrible DH on days against lefties, brings in some pop. But again, the same concept of, well, how much are we really getting out of him? The one signing I really like, Tyler O'Neill, very good, consistent ball player. I think he'll provide much better defense and maybe average for the Orioles than Santander. And eventually Kobe Mayo will get pulled up. Basalo is knocking on the door. They have a bunch of very good prospects that can definitely come up and be serviceable. It's just they already have that. They have a bunch of young guys. And some of them are pretty unproven. Gunnar Henderson proved himself last year, but now he's injured. And in the second half, he was still a phenomenal ball player, but he wasn't as good in the second half as he was in the first half. So how, those are big question marks to see, like, can this young team really improve and just be a dominant young team? And especially once you get to the playoffs, and the end of the year, August, September, where we saw them struggle, we don't know if they can really handle that, these young guys. And then they lose their ace, Corbin Burns, who is Corbin Burns. He's phenomenal. He gives you innings, he gives you strikeouts, he keeps his ERA low. He's just one of the best pitchers in the game. And then Anthony Santander, who, like I said for the Blue Jays, is just a locked-in 35, 40 home runs every single year. With the average in the walks and the strikeouts, who knows, but he's going to give you 40. And that's a huge part of your lineup. Especially when you have so many young guys, you want just consistency. As much consistency as possible. And I think they lost consistency, they lost firepower, and I think they're really banking on our young guys really taking off. And your best young guy is out for a good chunk of change. So I really think they're going to struggle more than a lot of people project. And then there's the Rays. The Rays kind of did a typical Rays offseason. A bunch of kind of irrelevant guys that nobody's really heard of, but additions that, are household names. Ha-Seong Kim, great fielder, plays every day. Hopefully the bat can pick it up a little bit better than last year. Danny Jansen, good depth. And then they get their ace back, Shane McClanahan. Phenomenal pitcher. He's going to be potentially injured to start the year. But if he can stay healthy, which I think he can, he's going to be huge for their rotation. And they lose nobody. So, last year they weren't great, but I think they're going to have a typical Rays off season where they picked up random guys that nobody's really heard of. They do well. They have some good young prospects ready to go. And I think overall they will get to that 80-win mark. It might be very, very close, but I think they'll get to it. Sorry, I keep looking at my phone, bunch of NFL news. But, well, let's get into rosters. and why I kind of ranked them this way, who I think their X factors are, question marks, stuff like that. So this is the projected lineup day one for the Yankees. Wells, Judge, Bellinger, Goldschmidt, Jazz, Volpe, Dominguez, Rice, Cabrera. Where I want to start is when you insert Stanton, then all of a sudden everybody gets bumped down, somebody gets bumped out, which is good for their lineup depth. However, for at least probably the first month of the season, and realistically probably longer, they're not going to have Stanton. So once you get here, and I think Volpe is a solid hitter. If he could bring down the strikeout rate, then I think he could be definitely an above average hitter. But he's about around league average for hitting. Now he's a phenomenal fielder. He gives you a bunch on the base path, and he's a Yankee. He plays the Yankee way, and I like that. And I think he's a very good ball player. But we don't know what we have in a Dominguez. We think we can project, outside of the left field struggles, which I think they should move him to center anyway. Doesn't really matter. The guy's gonna hit. He's gonna be good. He's going to be an above-average league hitter, and he's young, and I think he's great. Rice, I think, is also in that similar limelight of Dominguez, where I think he will be an above-average hitter. How above average? I'm not sure, but I also don't know how much consistent playing time he will get later in the year. I think the biggest problem is really the depth of the lineup once you get here. In a World Series aspect, obviously, for just team by team basis, this lineup is gonna be above average. How above average is really the question, and I don't think it's insanely above average yet. I think if they go make it a trade deadline move, if a couple guys start to really bang like Dominguez, if Wells can stay healthy, and if Stanton can come back, then all of a sudden this lineup then takes a jump into, okay, it's probably just as good as last year, if not a little bit better. And then they really become an extremely scary... They are a scary team, obviously, for the AL, but just the entire league, including the NL, World Series outlook, then they become extremely scary because of how solid their pitching and their bullpen is. So I would say the biggest X factor, at least for the beginning of the season, I would say is Dominguez, because if he can really kind of hit, that gives this lineup depth. But obviously their biggest X factor for the general season is getting Stanton back and making sure he's good for the playoffs and can give them consistent run the end of August, all of September, and then be ready for the playoffs. Yeah, so that's really my take on the lineup. And if they want to be a serious World Series contender, which obviously they are because they're the best team in the AL, but if they don't want to get 4-1'd again when they face the Dodgers or a team like that, you really got to figure out Cabrera, in my opinion. Now, maybe he has a great year, and then all of a sudden this lineup has a lot of depth, but you really got to figure out Cabrera, third base. That's going to be also probably another big X factor for them. Their rotation on paper with Schmidt down and Heel down doesn't look phenomenal. It's still, I think, the best in the division, whether they have those two guys. But obviously, when Heel comes back and when Schmidt is back, which I don't think Schmidt, could be wrong, but I don't think Schmidt is going to miss a horrible amount of time. Only shoulder fatigue. So they'll have Schmidt back. I really think that their rotation is the best in the division, one of the best in the AL, and I think there's no real worry. I think the only X factor is Rodon, because he's so inconsistent. 1 month he'll be the Rodon you paid for. The next month he'll be kind of a just bad pitcher. So if he can be consistent, then all of a sudden you don't have to rush Heel back, and you can let him rest and save his innings for the playoffs. So you really need Rodon to be consistent all year long to not have to rush Heal back. But either way, I don't have much concern about their rotation. And the bullpen is the same way. Williams is great. Weaver, Cruz, Tim Hill, Leiter gave them some good innings. The bottom depth isn't flashy, but they're going to have arms. They can always go get arms. It's nothing like major concern, and I think it is the best bullpen in the division. Overall, I think they're clearly, on paper, the best team in the division. When healthy, they're the best team in the division. But I think health and the depth of the lineup is going to be not a major concern, but a concern. Something they're going to have to look at and really wonder and feel out, and that could lead to a rockier start to where they might get in the hole a little bit to the Red Sox, to where at the end it is close. But I think in general, if everything goes relatively smooth with injuries, guys get back in good and relatively positive timetables, they should win the division. But it is going to be very close. And the reason why it's going to be close is when we look at this roster. Roster-wise, I think they have the best lineup in the division, especially at the end of the season. Duran's phenomenal. Devers is great. Bregman is great. Casas is great. Story, if he can bounce back, can be great. If not, they can trade him, go get whatever they need. They still have guys like Marcelo Meyer. They have Christian Campbell. They have Roman Anthony to replace maybe a Rafaela. Connor Wong's okay. I mean, he's a catcher. There's not a ton of positional value, especially at the plate for catchers. But Abreu was fine. Definitely an above-average hitter. I mean, their worst hitter here is Abreu, and you have a question mark on Christian Campbell if he can do it at the big league level. But I think he will. I think every sign points to it. It's just a very deep, balanced lineup. And when it comes at least head-to-head with the Yankees, they have some Yankee killers. Devers and Bregman at the top of that lineup. No Yankee fan really wants to see that. Who knows what Trevor Story is? The young guys, are they going to feed into this energy of, we hate the Yankees. Like, we're the Red Sox. We're not supposed to like you. We hate you. So there's a lot of good things going for that lineup. And phenomenal coaching on top of that. The rotation is also much better than it was last year. And when guys are fully healthy, will continue to be significantly better. Crochet is an ace. Buehler as a 3 is great. I like Tanner Houck. He had a great year last year. Fitz and Newcomb, okay, you're not as confident on the depth there, but if you get Giolito back, if he's even 3/4 of what he usually is, he'll slot in as a nice 4. They have some injuries. Bello, if you can get him back. Cutter Crawford, they have injuries. Sandoval's going to start out. Maybe out for at least the first 2 months, but he can come back. They have the depth. They're injured, but their depth is injured. Their top end is still A-okay right now. So based off of injuries, I think they're going to start out maybe a little bit hotter than, let's say, the Yankees. But I don't think it's going to be anything. I don't think they're going to be 20-2 through the first. They're not a perfect team, but I think they are a very, very good team that's going to contend with the Yankees throughout the season, especially if the Yankees start off a little slow. Also, Yoshida, I think he'll get flipped, but who knows? And then just some of their, when we look at their depth, where is he? Marcelo Meyer, phenomenal. I mean, they have a lot of very highly touted prospects. This organization rank, where's overall? 800, 600, 430, 361. Where's it? Oh, overall, okay, 57. They have a bunch of top number 2. They have a bunch of top 100 guys. So I think the prospects will also be there come playoff time. But in general for the season, I think they'll finish second. And then the bullpen, Chapman and Hendricks I like. Slayton's pretty good. Whitlock's pretty good. And then they kind of lose it after that. If Wilson or Bernardino can kind of take off a little bit, especially Bernardino, that would be huge for them. They'd actually have a lefty they can go to. But I think it's for their budget and based off of recent history, what they need to fill, obviously this is projecting, is going to be easier for them than, let's say, the Yankees, just because third base, and also that they don't have a deep prospect pool, and on the basis of recently they don't want to go over $300 million. I don't know who is really out there that contract-wise is going to be a good trade, especially if they have to get rid of Cabrera. And if Stanton goes down for a while, is Ben Rice that DH? Is Dominguez going to hit? I think he will. But, so I think trade deadline, the Yankees might have more struggle based off of their budget and prospect pool to really get what they need to get, which is more of a playoff concern, but also second half of the season too. But I think no matter what, the Yankees will win the division. Blue Jays lineup, we touched on it a lot already. Listen, Bo Bichette, if he can get back to his norm, especially what we think he can be, maybe walk a little bit more, is going to be huge for them. Jimenez, if he can just be a little bit above league average, walk a little bit more, with his defense, he's 1,000,000% a plus. Kirk is health, Springer, health, and also slowing down the decline a little bit. And yes, the bottom it gets a little thin in general, but with this top half, those guys can really, if Bo can really take off again, if Jimenez can be a little bit better, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, this 1 through 4 is not anything you want to sleep on. Bo, Vladdy, Santander, Jimenez, Springer as a veteran bat, Kirk as a solid everyday catcher. That's going to be definitely an above average lineup, well above average, and a scary one. And I think their rotation is also kind of slept on. Berrios had a good year last year. You're hoping he can build off of it. Gausman is one of the most consistent pitchers in the league. You're hoping he can kind of bounce back a little bit. He had a little bit of a down year compared to most, but if he can bounce back a little bit, Bass is going to give you innings. Francis is going to give you good innings. And then Scherzer on the back end is going to be perfectly fine. I think this rotation is not a wow factor rotation, but I don't think there's going to be any day where they have a significant mismatch in the pitching matchup compared to the team that they play. And on top of that, they have a bullpen that is ready to go. Hoffman, Green, Garcia. You're going to have Sandelin, who's pretty solid. Also, Dalton Varsho is going to be good for them. Some more pitching depth that is injured. Overall, it's a very, very solid bullpen with guys who have done it, who have been doing it. And the rotation's also very solid. And they're just, they might be the definition of solid. Which is that good enough to make the playoffs? I don't know. But to me, I think if you have a bunch of solid depth and you have consistency, that's the number one thing for having a good regular season. Which isn't rocket science, but I think that's why I like them more than the Orioles, because there's more inconsistency when we look at a young guy like Kowser had a great year last year. Can he repeat it? Or a sophomore slump? We don't know. Rutschman had his struggles last year that we really didn't think was going to happen. He's still a phenomenal ball player. He's, if not the best catcher, one of the best catchers in the league. Same thing with Westberg as Kowser. O'Hearn was also very solid last year, but he's getting older. He is definitely getting older. O'Neill is going to be good for them. But then we look at the bottom. Mountcastle. You hope he has the same year as last year, but he has shown flashes of down the stretch struggling. Mullins is getting more and more inconsistent as the years go on. And then Urias is nobody you're going to ride home on. And then when you look at a guy like Holiday, I think he will definitely have a significantly better year than last year. But just because he has a significantly better year than last year doesn't mean that he is going to jump himself and their lineup up to like an elite end lineup. Now, yes, once you get Gunnar back, that's going to be huge. But until you get Gunnar back, you might start the season a little slow. And they have some decent bench guys, don't get me wrong. But when you combine that with this rotation, Eflin is solid. Morton is also solid. But Grayson's out for a little bit of time. And then after that, it kind of takes a little bit of a, steep slope down. And also the bullpen, in my opinion, is a little overrated. It's not bad, but I think it's a little overrated. I think a lot of people are overrating Yainer Cano a little bit. Bautista is great. Dominguez is pretty inconsistent. The Phillies were not upset when they got rid of him. Soto's getting a little bit older. Their bottom of their bullpen isn't great. They have some injuries, but in general, I worry a little bit about the overall consistency and depth. And I think they're a little overrated overall in their pitching, which definitely took a step back compared to last year. And then we get to Tampa. Sorry, 1 second. Tampa is Tampa. I like their lineup. It's not an amazing lineup. I think it'll be around league average. But I think if their young guys, especially Junior Caminero, can kind of take off, if they can stay healthy, I think it's a deep lineup. And I think with the pitching they're going to get back this year with McClanahan and some solid bullpen arms they found last year, and Uceta and Fairbanks, and Clevenger had a good year. Rodriguez, hopefully Mason Montgomery has a little bit better year. Overall, they're a very okay team. They don't have glaring holes. They don't have extreme pop or stardom. They're going to play like the Tampa Bay Rays that we know. Not a lot of household names. Grind it out kind of baseball. Find some diamond in the roughs. But I think there's definitely like a clear tier between them and the rest of the division. Or at least where they're going to project for the rest of the division. But overall, this is kind of how I had them ranking out. I think they got the best lineup, second best rotation, fourth best bullpen. So I think the bullpen's going to be a major concern. Not major, but I think it will be a concern for the Red Sox. Big concern for the Orioles is going to be their pitching. Can their pitching be good enough to where they can win this 86 games? I really don't think. I think it's going to be close, but I think they're going to have their struggles. And the Blue Jays, can their guys really succeed like we've seen them succeed in their lineup? If their lineup can bang how we project it would be, if some guys can have a little bit of a bounce back, all of a sudden the Blue Jays have a nice bullpen, solid rotation. They have an identity of, we're going to have close games, but we're going to be a good team. And the Yankees, it's just figuring out the lineup and figuring out what they need to add and also adding it, which I think is of all these teams, I think they're the third least likely to add at the deadline. And what I mean by that is, like, obviously the Rays are probably going to try and sell a little bit, not a lot, but the Orioles, I have major concerns just because they didn't do it this offseason. But the Blue Jays added, didn't lose anybody, and they're trying to prove to Vladdy, like, no, we're a good team. They're trying to prove to the MLB, like, this is a place you want to come. They keep saying we're willing to throw the money out. They were in on Shohei. They were in on Soto. They're claiming they're in on Vladdy. So this is kind of a big prove it year. Like, are you actually in, or are you just saying you're in? And the Red Sox, I think, have the prospect pool, and they have the team where what they need is not significant. And they showed us this year they're willing to go over the budget that they've done recently. So that's why I think they're most likely to. And I think the Yankees fall in the middle. It's really going to depend on how much they need and how much they're really willing to go over that 300. Which, yes, going over 300 is not like a... Like, saying they need to go over 300 may sound a little, like, selfish almost. Like, really? Like, is $300 million not enough? In my opinion, with how the Dodgers have placed themselves, if they don't want to face the Dodgers again and get 4-1, yeah, you're going to have to, unfortunately. I think they could beat a lot of other teams, especially in the NL. I think they could beat the Mets in the series. They could beat the Padres, the Phillies. But for some reason, the Dodgers this past season kind of found their number against them. And the Dodgers got significantly better and keep spending. They just keep spending. So as the Yankees, you lose your second best hitter last year. You lose your third best hitter last year. Stanton, during the season, Glaber, I think, had a little bit more total value. But, all right, you lose your second and your fourth best hitter who had significant value to your team last year. You really need to figure out how to replace that. And I think they've almost gotten to keeping it the same. But if the Dodgers have gotten significantly better, you need to get significantly better. Or else it's going to be the same scenario where if you go up against them, it's going to be 4-1. And the other thing is, the AL is wide open still, but there are teams that are now are going to be back and going to be better. The Red Sox, the Rangers, do the Royals take another step? I think it'll be a much harder playoff this year than it was last year for them. And on top of that, the Dodgers got better. So they need to get overall better. I think they are overall the same. They're much better pitching, but they need to get better in all facets, which defensively they did. I think pitching they did, but I think hitting they definitely did not. So to get to that level of being competitive and on paper, yeah, I think they need to go fill third base. And I think that obviously they don't need to do it now. I'm just saying when it gets to the trade deadline and also the outlook for the playoffs, I'm a little more hesitant to put full stock into them of like, yeah, they're going to go get their guy when they need to go get their guy. They have done it in the past, but to a milder degree. And on top of that, I don't know, just recent history, they really are hesitant going over that 300. And I don't know if that's just been a trend because they felt like they were closer last year than they actually were, or if that's just how the Yankees operate now. And obviously, it's hard for me to like blame them because $300 million is insane. But I really think if they want to have a serious shot, specifically in a matchup with the Dodgers, and this is obviously projecting. I don't know how the season goes. Maybe the young guys all of a sudden take a leap, and then in that case, fine. But from what people are projecting, and from what I've heard from other Yankee fans, the biggest question for the Yankees is there's going to be something they need to add at the deadline. Are they going to be fully in on doing it? Or is it going to be like a little patch job? Kind of like potholes in New York, too. Are they just going to patch it and move on? Or are they going to actually, go out there and get that guy? No matter the budget, no matter what it does. And I don't know. And I don't know if they have the tools to do that as well as they've had in the past. But yeah, this is all projecting. I still think they're the best team in the AL. If I had to project it today, we'll do a playoff projection at the end of the next video. But they probably, if I had to project, they would make the World Series. I don't know if they're gonna. I don't know if they're on the level of winning it, depending on who they match up with. But that's for future debate. But yeah, that's it. So hope everybody enjoyed the video, and until next time.